You're tuned in to the Dr. Kinney Show, and I'm your host, Dr. Erin Kinney, a naturopathic doctor and speaker dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of your body and guiding you back into balance. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Kinney Show. This week, I am joined by Eric Rittmeyer, who is the Director of Business Development and a Mental Toughness Coach with LifeMed Institute in Baltimore. He's also a former U.S. Marine, and he's published a couple of books, which we're going to talk about. But I'm really excited to have him here so he can share his story. Thank you so much for being on the show, Eric.
Dr. Kinney, I'm so excited to be here. I love it. This is my stuff. This is wild. Just awesome. It's so nice to meet you here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I love your energy. I can't wait for this conversation. So can you start by sharing with listeners just your background and your story? And then I want to hear what a mental toughness coach is.
Yeah, it's funny. I get this all the time. Right?
I'm sure.
Like, what's a mental toughness expert? I'm like, I made it up. I don't know what it even is.
But it's great. Well, let's hear what it is. I love
it. So I was in the Marine Corps. So around high school, I went in the Marine Corps. I was not a school person. So I was like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. So I did my 4 years in there. When I got out, I jumped into the mortgage business, did that for a long time. And then as I was hiring and firing people and coaching and training, I started to recognize that I was pretty good at connecting with people. It was a kind of a skill I felt that I had. So a few years later, I decided to write a book about it. So in 2019, I published my first book. It's called The Emotional Marine. It's on mental toughness and emotional intelligence secrets to get people to instantly like you. So a mental toughness expert and mental toughness in general, in 2 words, it's just emotional control. We're not good at controlling emotion. So all my training is about people to recognize, like, hey, you can't stop the emotion. You can't suppress it. You can't ignore it. Learn to control it. That's the mental toughness piece of it. And then I started doing a lot of television. I got a ton of TV exposure for my first book. And then my whole life kind of changed back in 2014, went on for decided a new career. So I put more emphasis on the speaking end of it. So I deliver a 2-hour program called Psychological Performance Training, Critical Thinking, Objective Reality, Systematic Desensitization, Graduated Exposure Therapy, Self-Awareness, Self-Regulation, Motivation, Empathy, Social Skills.
Things. Yeah.
So all these things. So I started training sales teams on that. And then I ended up here with LifeMed about 3 years ago, as a Director of Business Development, trying to build the business, trying to build the brand, trying to get our name out there. And I became instantaneously obsessed with women's health. We do a lot of the hormone replacement therapies here. And as a non-medical person, I learned in about 7 seconds that there were just no resources for women that were going through a rough time with hormone imbalances. And I started researching, looking around, couldn't find anything, started trying to dig deep, and there were just no resources. So finally I was like, might as well write my second book. So about 2.5 years ago, started writing it. I call it the Menopausal Marine. So it's a play on words. First was Emotional Marine. Second was Menopausal Marine. And it's just a really, really simple guide that educates women on everything they know about hormones from A to Z, the studies that were done, the benefits, the risks, the symptoms that they can help out with, all these things, just a really, really simple to read. So fast forward to today, I'm out here spreading the good news of wellness and just helping people feel better.
Well, thank you for spreading and being on TV and doing the things. I think the more people that, know the resources that are available, it's, we all want to be well. And, I work with a lot of menopausal patients as well. It's a really tough time. Like your life, it's also a time in life when, if you've raised kids, like your kids are going off to college, like you might be dealing with aging parents. There's a lot of like life stuff going on. And then you throw in this crazy hormonal change and you're like, wait, I feel crazy. I'm not sleeping. My body feels different. So, and so is the book mostly focused on hormone replacement, that you're kind of teaching them about hormone replacement therapy?
So it's not all of it. That's a lot of it. The main thing is just educating them, number one, on, hey, this is what's happening when you're experiencing these hot flashes, night sweats, brain fog, insomnia, hair thinning, waking, sexual vitality, vaginal atrophy, vaginal dryness, urinary tract infections, heart palpitations. These are all things that are most likely
so many things, right?
So many things.
So many things.
Lucky as ladies.
I know.
So it's all those things. So when women go to their doctors, because what ends up happening is a lot of the doctors just like, hey, part of what you're doing, just cut out the chocolate chip cookies, don't drink wine, take anxiety medication. So my book, a lot of it is hormone replacement therapies because I'm so passionate about them. But the core of it's just the basic education for what you're going through. Absolutely.
But I think it's really great. It's been really interesting, in my profession, in the naturopathic world, which, sort of functional medicine, but, for a long time, we were all scared of hormone replacement therapy. There was a couple of studies that came out and I was like, no, we don't want to do them. And I think most women were like, no, I wouldn't want to take estrogen. I wouldn't want to do that. But in the last 5 to 10 years, the research has kind of completely, it's like the complete opposite. It's like, no, you really need to be on hormone replacement therapy. Those hormones are so important, particularly estrogen, right? And not just for sexual health. And it's so important for your mental health. It's important for your bone health. It protects you from Alzheimer's, dementia, so there's so many things that estrogen can really help out with. And, it's why we have all these symptoms when we have low estrogen, when we go through menopause. So I'm so happy that you are spreading the word out there and showing people, hey, no, there is actually research that shows this is really important and it's a really great tool.
Well, and the funny thing about that is, the research, there's really not a whole ton of new research. The way it's being analyzed, so it's the Women's Health Initiative is the study you're referring to back in 2002. It was the National Institute of Health. It was a $675 million study, to date, the largest randomized clinical trial specifically for women's health. And the takeaway from that study, when they shut it down 2.5 years early, the takeaway from the study was, if you take hormone replacement therapies, which was very common practice back in the 80s and 90s, if you were a menopausal woman, regardless of age, regardless of underlying health conditions, you took hormone replacement therapies. So the takeaway was, if you take hormone replacement therapies, you increase your risk of breast cancer by 25%. Fast forward now 20 plus years later, fortunately, people are viewing this study with a partially functioning frontal lobe that are saying, wait a second here, there was some information that was incorrectly extrapolated from this study. One of the lead principal investigators on that study, actually, Dr. Joanne Manson's her name, she's now coming out very publicly saying, hey, look, the way the information was put out there was just not totally accurate. So the studies that are now done, every study, like as you referenced here, estrogen especially, heart health, bone health, brain health, absolutely for all that stuff. But it's so incredibly important for women to make decisions in conjunction with their doctors, not 100% based on what they say. So a lot of the studies now they're done all point to the benefits of estrogen, but the core of what we know about hormone replacement therapies really roots back to that study from 2002, which the information's been there for 20 plus years. Fortunately, people are starting to view that through a different lens.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, because clearly I feel like you are into this research a little bit more, that it was more they saw a correlation with increased breast density, correct? Is that what they said?
So there's two animals. So the takeaway, the 25% increased risk in breast cancer was rooted from, there were two arms of the study. One was with uterus, one without uterus. The women with uterus, there were two arms in there. One was placebo. One was when they were taking what's called conjugated equine estrogen and medroxyprogesterone acetate. These are synthetic versions of estrogen and progesterone. A lot of women actually are pretty surprised. You probably know this. You've heard a synthetic estrogen called Premarin. A lot of women are surprised. That stands for pregnant mare urine. So that's what the estrogen was used that was in the study. So if you look at that placebo compared to the hormone arm, in the placebo, there were 4 women per 1,000 that developed breast cancer. In the arm with the hormones, estrogen and progesterone, 5 women developed breast cancer. So if you look at the relative risk, there was a 25% relative increased risk. If you look at the absolute risk, there was 1 additional woman per 1,000. There was a 0.1% increased risk for breast cancer. But then you go to the other arm for the women who did not have a uterus, who were taking estrogen alone. If you have an intact uterus, you would never take estrogen without offsetting it with progesterone. That can create what's called endometrial hyperplasia. But for the women who had the hysterectomies who didn't have a uterus, there was actually a 25% decreased risk in the estrogen-only arm. So there's all these misconceptions about it. And again, the biggest problem I have with it, Dr. Kinney, is the fact that it totally disregards the benefits that you get for heart health. As a woman, you are 8 to 10 times more likely to die of cardiovascular disease than you are breast cancer.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from breast cancer. I hate it with every ounce of my
terrible.
being.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. If a woman gets breast cancer, fortunately, there's about an 85% chance she will beat it. Heart disease, much more likely. And when you lose estrogen, you lose heart protection.
Yeah. 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 And again, that's one other thing. Again, the Alzheimer's dementia thing is such a big thing too. I get so many patients that come and they're like, hey, my parents are dealing with this. I want to make sure that's not me. What can I do? And I feel like keeping those estrogen levels in a good place is like foundational to making sure the brain health is in a good place.
These are called white matter hyperintensities, right? And these are what they show. Also, osteoporosis. That has got to be the most under-respected disease. You don't want to know the stats on hip fracture surgeries over the age of 60. They're horrifying. So if you have these studies that show it protects the heart, protects the brain, and also protects the bones. And again, I'm not saying that every single living, breathing human should start with hormone replacement therapies, but I do 100%. I'm adamant about every woman educating themselves on them. We're also now using bioidentical hormone replacement therapies. The women in the study, the median age was 62 years old, which is well outside when the average patient would start hormone replacement therapies. There were so many flaws there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of we're in a different space. And I think it's really, I don't know, I see this, as a clinician with my patients coming in the last couple of years, people are they're much more interested in keeping themselves well. They're interested in prevention. I mean, I think that's always been a thing, but I feel like after COVID, people were like, oh, wait, I got to think about my health. I need to take care of myself. And so people want this information. I'm sure you're seeing that with all, what you're doing with the book. People are hungry for this, right? They want to know.
You bring up a wonderful point. I have to say that is the one benefit. There were really no positives that came from COVID. One of the positives I do believe is I think it significantly increased everyone's levels of awareness to recognize that you cannot stop disease. Unfortunately, there are many things you can do to minimize your risk. But the one thing we can do is we can remain healthy. That is the best defense. Everybody, I don't know there's any medical person, me not being one of them, I'm not a medical person, I don't know there's any medical person that would deny the fact that if you are healthy, you significantly decrease your odds of, number one, getting type diseases, but number two, the ability to push through without any type of severe long-term adverse implications. So yes, it absolutely brought all this to the spotlight. It's preventative. It's proactive, not reactive. It's wellness, not sickness. Health spend versus well spent. These are all things that we talk about that unfortunately there's not been a whole bunch of emphasis. Now there is. Medicine 3.0, Dr. Peter Attia, I'm obsessed with him.
Yeah,
he's big into Medicine 3.0. I love Peter Attia.
Yeah, he's great.
And Medicine 3.0, preventative medicine. I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also, we're in this age where there is a lot of information, right? If you're on social media, you can get a lot of information about your health, which there's kind of two sides to that coin. It can be really helpful because it allows you to kind of empower yourself with knowledge. It can also sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. I sometimes get patients and they're like, oh my gosh, I've read this and it's conflicting. And what do I do? And, one of my main messages on this podcast is for, if you're struggling with any sort of health thing or you're getting conflicting information, make sure you're working with a provider. I think you mentioned, a minute ago that work with your doctor, talk to your doctor, make sure your doctor knows this is available. But it's so important to have someone that you're working with to walk you through this, to figure out what the best thing for you is going to be. Because as you said, not everyone, hormones are not the right choice for everyone, but they're a really great tool that needs to be discussed and but you need to have someone walking through that who's, knowledgeable about that, right?
And you bring up a great point. I talk about this. I say inch deep, mile wide. This doesn't just apply to medicine. I believe it applies to every aspect of our lives. Inch deep, mile wide, meaning that go just an inch below the layer on lots of different topics, learn just enough to be educated on the topic. As it relates to health, again, I'm obsessed with women's health. I'm infatuated with it. Next in line to that, it kind of goes in conjunction with those cardiovascular health. You look at cardiovascular health. This is really the only inevitable disease of our species. Every one of us will die with some form of atherosclerosis, but yeah. We have more research on heart disease than any other disease, yet it's still the number one leading cause of death. And it baffles my brain how we have all this science on it. We have pharmacological interventions. We have the ability to pretty much eradicate it if we wanted to really put people on medication. But the issue is we don't research it. We don't learn it. We don't understand it. So therefore we don't take the preventative measures that we need to take early on. This is a long-term disease. Heart disease doesn't happen when somebody dies suddenly. That normally is something that's been progressing over the years. They didn't just all of a sudden get it. They died suddenly. It's because they didn't know it. These are all things every one of us should take responsibility for, to educate on what we need to do to stay healthy for as long as possible.
Yeah. So getting the information and knowing what you can do lifestyle wise, supplement wise is really valuable. Yeah. So again, thank you for putting this information out there. I think it's another great resource for women to have. Now, what do you, I know you're passionate about women's health. I know at LifeMed, you guys also treat men, right? And do testosterone therapy and whatnot. Do you have anything you want to talk about there?
Yeah. So I think it's important to point out too, Dr. Kinney, our medical director is a cardiologist. We have 10 nurse practitioners, 2 physician assistants, another MD. So yeah, we're a concierge wellness center. So cardiac, preventative medicine, hormone replacement therapies, all the age management, aesthetics, facial contouring, lip fillers, Botox, VI peels, diamond glows. But yeah, the hormone stuff is so critical. Our blood panels we do, this is advanced biochemical testing. All of our locations have Quest phlebotomists in-house Monday through Friday. We do an 85 marker panel. It's hormones, genetics, cardiac particle sizes, metabolic, kidney, liver function, glucose levels, thyroid levels, inflammation markers, vitamins. We check every level. The real thing that distinguishes us from a lot of other clinics, we spend an hour, our providers spend an hour with every single one of our patients to review A to Z, everything in blood. I love hormones. I think it's a pretty quick, easy fix for hormones, but we look at all the cardiac markers as well. We look at hemoglobin A1C, diabetes is a very big thing. Your lipids, your LDLs, HDLs, triglycerides, apolipoprotein Bs, Lp(a), all these things, your insulin resistance. There are all these things that a lot of people, when they come out, like a facility like ours, we're wellness. So when people come out, they don't have a runny nose or a sore throat.
Yeah.
They come out because they feel pretty well. Then they end up determining that there's something else going on. So to answer your question, that was a long answer. Yes, for men, testosterone replacement therapies are great as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be useful, and it's great. I think it's really amazing as a patient to go into somewhere where they're going to run all these labs and you're going to get all the information that you need in order to make the right decisions for your health protocol. Because it can be, as I mentioned, it can be overwhelming. You're like, well, so-and-so says I should take this supplement and so-and-so says I should be on this, but really you need to know what your body needs. So it's really important to run those labs and see what's going on.
And again, it goes back to what I said here in the onset. It's educating yourself.
Yes.
So you're not coming in totally blind. And again, I'm not, by all means, we have doctors for a reason. You are insanely smart. You help us live longer, and we 100% should find someone we trust and rely on them for advice. But like I said, we need to have some skin in this game individually. We need to have something. If it's 1% even, at least it's something. So that way, when someone's presented to you, you've already done just enough research. You always want your doctor to know more than you, obviously, but to be able to say, oh yeah, I've heard omega-3s or fish oils are good for heart health, or yeah, B12, methylated B12 is good for energy metabolism. We don't make it on our own. All these little things, A1C, I know that's blood sugar. I know that's potential for diabetes. I know it could decrease my life on average by 6.2 years if I'm a type 2 diabetic. These are things that we just all have to know. The good thing is, like you said, we live in the information age right now. So it's a click away, but it is very, very important to make certain that you do look at your resources, right? Look at where you're finding information. Yes. You can find anything you want out there.
Yes, you
That's
can.
why it's so critical as a provider.
Yes, you can Google whatever you want. You can probably find Google or get Google to tell you what you want to hear. So you got to check the sources. So let's circle back and talk a little bit more about your first book, the Mental Toughness book. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're dive deeper in that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm fascinated with this one too, Dr. Kinney. I mean, we're emotional creatures, every single one of us. We're hardwired to feel first and think later. The issue is we get no training on how to control emotion, how to deal with them. We're just taught to shut it off. We're just taught to suppress it. Hey, you're at work now. I know your pet cat just died last night, but just turn off that feeling. When you leave work, it's impossible. You can't do it. So mental toughness, emotional intelligence, these are things that every single one of us can improve upon. It's just about learning what's causing that emotion, recognizing that it's trying to tell us something, and learning to channel it the positive way, to build deeper relationships, to not react to situations. So many of us go through life reacting. Something happens, we have a knee-jerk emotion-based reaction. We regret it 10 minutes later. This is what we do. We can't control it. So instead of reacting, mental toughness is about learning to respond. So when you react, it's emotional. When you respond, it's logical. You process it through your brain. You formulate a response that's more appropriate. That way you're able to convey a message without getting angry and yelling, which we now have a society of people. I call this emotional intoxication. So as emotion goes up, logic goes down. They're inversely related. When you get so overcome an emotion, you can't think logically. I call that emotional intoxication. We have a country right now that's drunk in emotion. We are just incapable of accepting an opposing point of view. We don't know how to process that feeling. The minute we disagree with someone, we automatically dislike them. And it gets really dangerous, especially coming up here in the next few months. We're heading into this election season. This is where a lot of relationships are ruined. A lot of people get very upset. They say things they regret. So mental toughness for me is just all about helping people to recognize things that we're all able to do. We just have to understand that the emotion's there. Let's learn to see what caused it first off, then channel it in a positive manner. Don't try to stop it.
Yeah, that's so have the emotion. So it's basically, are you teaching them to stop before they react and then process a little bit? And then I'm curious. I want to learn a little more. What's the process?
Yeah. So with me, when I'm doing my live programs, for me, it's all about dropping a bomb on them. I say, I stop and I'm like, okay, everybody just got emotional. You had an emotional reaction based on words that I've said. I just stimulated some sort of emotional response. Feel that, learn that, understand that. So when you're in the heat of the moment, when the lights come on, when you have to perform, whether it's at work, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a heated argument, whatever, when you feel that emotion go high, have these coping mechanisms. I call this an emotional vocabulary. Learn to compartmentalize emotions. Learn to separate that. Learn to say, okay, I just feel it. I got it. Understood. Okay. I'm right now in an emotional state of mind. So everything I'm getting ready to say and do I have to be extremely cautious because I'm probably going to do things I'm going to regret. So instead of stopping it, it's learning that and understanding that and just knowing that when that trigger is pulled, we're going to go a little off the deep end here. And again, most people have no clue they're going through it.
Yeah.
Most people have no idea the emotions are taking control of them. It wrecks relationships. It ruins businesses, and it doesn't allow us to do what we really deep down feel like we want to do. When we're at our angriest, we're at our stupidest, unfortunately.
Yeah. So it's developing awareness of when you're emotional and when you're in a rational state.
That is absolutely correct. And the key to it is not trying to suppress. This is where we do damage for boys. I feel like this is where we really wreck young men, is raising them. You can't cry. Boys don't cry. This is extremely, extremely dangerous. It's like, I'm a lot older than you, but when I was a kid, our parents, our grandparents always say, Eric, don't hold your sneezes. If you hold your sneeze, your lungs are going to collapse. It's the same exact thing with emotions. If we don't have an outlet, and again, I tell everyone, every single emotion's okay. When I speak in front of these groups, like, look, if you want to punch me in the face, that emotion is okay. It's absolutely okay. It's how you react to that emotion that's so insanely important. Don't try to stop the need from wanting to punch me. Just learn something, learn how to control things so you don't actually act on that feeling. That's all this about. It's not about what you do. It's about what you think about what you do. A little play on words.
So interesting. Oh, and I think it's funny you said the hold in the sneeze. When you hold in any emotion, it can affect your physical body. Like it will turn into it causes symptoms if you don't let emotions out. So that was I need to pick that book up. I need to read it.
Yeah, it's a simple read. Yeah. It's just one steps on how to instantly connect with people and just all these little things we can do. And you bring up a good point. And as it relates to wellness, especially you think about wellness, you think about the physical component, but there's physical, emotional, spiritual, social, intellectual. These are all arms to wellness. And if we only focus on one, let's say the physical aspect of it, which is wonderful, but if we do that and disregard all the others, we're not going to be able to live an overall well life. We have to address each one. And I feel like emotions are the ones that just get totally put on the back burner because, again, we're afraid to talk about it. We don't want to discuss it. Everything we do, we're controlled by our emotions. It guides us in everything we do. Our beliefs dictate our actions. If we have belief systems that are tied to nothing objective, just warm, fuzzy feelings. I talk about our hearts, what we feel in our hearts, superseding what we see with our eyes. This is subjective perceptions overriding objective observations. We're a society that it doesn't matter what we see with our eyes. It doesn't matter which fact you give me. It only matters what I feel in my heart. And that's extremely dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there can be value in that, but it's not not in the business or in a lot of times. I mean, there can be value in, feeling with your heart in a romantic or a mothering type of situation. But if you're trying to make decisions or communicate with someone, sometimes that gets misconstrued or you said you don't have control over it, right?
Well, the other really big one just mentioned too, where that feeling in that heart superseding we see with our eyes is religion, right? Not that there's any better example than religion. So by all means, we absolutely positively 100% should believe in things that we can't quantify with facts. Religion is a prime example. Love, explain to me love. Give me the steps on how to, you can't, right? Because this is something we should allow our hearts to guide us. But what ends up happening with most of it is we use that same exact thought process for other parts of our lives. We become dependent on that. And the minute someone produces information that conflicts with that warm, fuzzy feeling, and especially the older we get, if we have this warm feeling in our heart that we believe every fact tells us it might be wrong, the minute someone like me proposes a question to that, I ask you a critical thinking question that calls into question your belief, you fly off the deep end. You don't know how to be upset with me. You yell at me. You scream at me. I've had death threats. I mean, it's just people just go off the deep end because they haven't been taught these mechanisms for how to convey their disagreement. They instantaneously revert to anger, violence, blood pressure skyrockets. Mental toughness is emotional control. In 2 words, that's all it is.
Yeah. So what a valuable tool to have to develop that awareness and then be able to, I would imagine, is a great tool in business and relationships. I mean,
oh, it's critical. And I got to tell you, when you get put in these situations, and part of my program is talking about levels of awareness and understanding our levels of awareness. When you are fully in touch with your thoughts, with your beliefs, and it sounds hairy-fairy, and I'm not into all these bubble gum and rainbows and Skittles and unicorns and high fives and kumbayas. I'm not into that, right? But there is definitely, I've seen this time and time in my almost 20 years now and specializing in this. I've seen it way too many times. There's significant benefits into understanding these things, manipulating them, and you get put in situations where the heat's on, people are upset, you're in a hostile situation. The one who keeps his head is the one who wins. And if you can remain in control of that emotion, you will diffuse situations, you'll strengthen relationships. I call this emotional capacity.
Yeah.
There's so many benefits to it, but there's zero training. None of us get any types of training.
No, where would you get this?
That teaches us. You don't. So I feel like the only people I found that really have any type of training here really are people who served in the military, law enforcement, high-end professional athletes. This is a place where we have to be able to function in extremely high-pressure situations. I use a process called systematic desensitization. These are two of the biggest words in my language. I have no idea how to spell them. But I can tell you, you just put yourself in that situation so many times that you desensitize your brain to it. So when it comes to emotional control, you just try to prepare. You prepare for it as best as you possibly can. So when that trigger is pulled, your brain, you're already there. Okay, trigger's pulled. I now know what's getting ready to happen. Let's tone it back. Let's keep it down. Let's go through the processes. When you're able to do that, your whole life becomes better. You don't get upset at stuff. You're able to strengthen the relationships. Again, you can be in these situations where it's not nice. Something bad's going wrong. It can be business at home, whatever. You keep your cool. Everything ends up being okay.
But so I have a question. So you're in a situation, someone, really angers you and you have that anger and you recognize it and you're able to move on without the anger, affecting how you're communicating or what you're saying. Where's the processing of the anger? Like, where does it go? How do you how are you dealing with the anger? I know you're recognizing it, but where does it go?
Sure. Everybody has different. I feel this is where men and women are very, very different, right? So I talk about this. So when men get put in these situations, we normally revert to what I call avoidance coping. So when men get put in these situations, we avoid it, right? So if there's something bad going on, we avoid it. With substance abuse, with suppressing it, we're not as good at articulating our disagreements, let's say. Whereas women use more of what I call tend and befriend, meaning that they tend to the issue, they befriend other people. This is obviously not 100% of the time, but what I found personally is that's normally how males and females process it. But to answer your question, kind of how to extinguish it or to let it dissipate, it's just having these mechanisms that we go to, this toolbox that we go to, this emotional vocabulary that we go to, figure out what the root cause of it, and then say, okay, how am I going to allow this to impact me? Everybody has different things. It could be exercise. It could be, there's reading. There's all these different things people have. But at the very, very foundation of it is understanding what is causing it.
I gotcha.
And then trying to stop it, recognize it, and channel in a positive manner.
Yeah. So I get it. So you're creating an awareness about the emotion, and you're like, why am I having this emotion? And probably just in the stopping of that, like, okay, makes sense.
It's not even trying to, that's the play on words too, but too. It's not even trying to stop it. Yeah. It's allowing it.
It's allowing it.
Exactly correct. It's
but
recognizing it, none of us.
You're allowing it to be present, but you're not allowing it to overcome your frontal lobe or your higher reasoning.
You are learning process to respond to it as opposed to reacting to it.
Got it.
Again, 99% of people, this, they just go through life reacting to situations. Emotion goes up, logic goes down. They have no idea they're drunk in emotion. They say and do things. This is how everybody operates. It's the same thing with communication. You have these people, we listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. So we're listening to people, we're communicating with people. In our minds, we're trying to formulate a response back to that person. The microsecond we have that response, everything else that person says is Charlie Brown talk. There's a break in conversation. That person replies back. The other person listens just long enough. So instead of listening with the intent to reply, listen with the intent to understand. If you truly work on that and get good at that, that's another secret to help diffuse situations. You're making that person feel like, I might totally disagree with you. I still think you're a crazy person, but I understand. I got you. I understand where you're coming from. If you can make that person feel that, again, you take these bad situations and it ends up not being that horrible because they feel like there's someone there who's truly listening to them. Yeah.
And being listened to it always feels good when someone's listening to you, even if the person doesn't agree with you. You're right about that. That's
spot on. Yeah. That's all we want is someone that's ever, we feel like we think we're important, right? We think we're important. We just hear me out. Just listen to me, uninterrupted. Show that person respect. Don't look at your watch, undivided attention. Make it all about that person. Make them feel important. Call them by their name. Make them laugh. The humor. I love dad jokes. I have tons of dad jokes. They're stupid, right? But it makes people laugh. It's a universal language. these are all very simple things we can do. But unfortunately, again, just as a society, it's just more about social media than social interaction. It's a very internal type thing. We don't, we're not too worried about other people. It's the easiest thing ever. And I think what people miss out the most on this, and I'll stop. I think people miss out the most on is they don't recognize that when they truly are concerned about other people, listen to other people, understand, it has this reciprocating effect where we internally end up feeling good about it too. And people witnessing it feel good about it, right? It's this called effective presence. I mean, these are all things that any of us can do, but we've had nobody that's ever taught us how to do it. We've been taught to memorize and regurgitate information in school. And the higher the grade you get on your test, the better the job you get. We haven't been taught how to handle an opposing point of view or to help somebody when they're going through emotional distress, or how to connect with them, how to be aware of our emotions, how to regulate our emotions. Nobody teaching us this stuff.
Yeah, but you're teaching it. So are you still actively teaching this type of workshop? Tell me about that.
I do. So it's a 2-hour program I do, Dr. Kinney. I mean, the majority of the time it's mainly for sales teams I work with, but really any companies I go into, it's really about helping them, to build these relationships internally. Right now, especially around this time of year, a lot of companies are coming to me because they're concerned about people's beliefs on certain topics and how that it adversely impacts their companies. And this is about just getting everyone, again, to raise that level of awareness to help them know that, okay, you think what you think, I think what I think. We can have our disagreements. We can still function. We can compartmentalize. So the program I deliver normally is for salespeople. It's a 2-hour program to, again, just help them to recognize that, if we allow emotions to control, we're not going to get very far at work and also at home. That's what I love about the topic. And it has nothing to do with smart. IQ was totally off the plate. I don't care how smart you are. Everyone can increase their ability to connect with other people.
Yeah. Super cool. So if people are interested in learning more about your books, your work, where's the best place for them to head to?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
my books are on Amazon, both my books are on Amazon, emotionalmarine.com, menopausalmarine.com for my menopause book. We're here at LifeMed. We're in Maryland. We have 5 different locations, also one in Rehoboth Beach. LifeMedInstitute.com. So I would welcome anyone who has any questions. And I can't thank you enough for having me, Dr. Kinney.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. And I'm sure you can look out for it on TV because you do a lot of TV appearances too. So look out.
I love my television.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, thank you, Eric. This was a great conversation. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to connect with me on social media and leave a rating and/or a review. This helps grow the show so more people have access to this knowledge that leads to empowered healing. Love and light, and see you next week.